Hi everyone, it's J-Belle and this is Geeky Voices where I talk about what random bits of geekdom I've been into lately. So, in case you couldn't notice, I have a visual aid this week. Very exciting stuff. This week, lately, I have been into rereading uh, one of my favorite trilogies. So, I am a huge Mercedes Lackey fan. She was one of my first authors that made me realize that I was really into fantasy, and I remember getting the first book I ever read by her. I'm pretty sure was Winds of Change because I remember getting it at a library book sale where basically at the end of the day it would be $1 for a whole paper bag full of old beat up books, and this one's like super taped up and such. But I got it because the title and the cover interests me, and I've been hooked on her ever since. Even though it was the second book in the trilogy, like I still was completely enthralled. And I think the second one of her books I ever read was the last Herald Mage series with Magic's Price, which was the final 3 books of the trilogy. So like I've read her books out of order. Although nowadays, if I'm reading her stuff, I definitely point to do in order. But back then, I didn't. Like you could still totally get hooked on her books. But yeah, as I said, like she's one of my favorite authors. I've loved her since I was in middle school. I have been at random bookstores or things. I've made like friendships with people just because we both had common love of Mercedes Lackey. She's a super prolific author, and she has a lot of different series. I tend to like her older stuff better. Like some of my favorite ones of her worlds are the Valdemar universe and the Bardic Choices and Bardic Voices / Bardic Choices series, which I'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, Valdemar like is super prolific. Lots of really great trilogies are in there, and she has such a great world building going on in such an interesting world. And you're kind of like, I want to be a herald in her world. I want to be like one of the special good guys. So it's like her. So Valdemar, like I feel, is feeling very hopeful, and one of the things I like about that series is that a lot of times the characters, they can be in different ages, but sometimes like the characters are teenagers, and like yeah, they still have like sucky like parent situations, but they're still kind of like empowered in a way, like they're still able to affect like major change, which I think is really cool. And that's like I remember like one of my favorite series of all time, like any medium, is Avatar: The Last Airbender, and that was like one of the things I was very struck about, how like these are some really young people, but like they are able to have a big impact on the world, and they're left freedom to do so. Whereas like in our world, it's like if you're a teenager, well at least like in the US, like if you're a teenager, you're kind of stuck with whatever your parents want you to do. Like you don't really have much autonomy or independence to really like. I mean, then on the flip side, you don't have to have a job to keep yourself alive at like 12, 13, 15, like in the U.S., I assume, unless you're in a really bad situation. But for the most of us, that's not the case. But yeah, no, I really like her stuff. But anyways, on to the series I just reread. Like, as I said before, I tend to rewatch things, I tend to reread things, and this is one of my all-time favorite one of her book trilogies ever. I originally, it's actually it's called Free Bards, but it's actually a trilogy of books combined into one. It's the Bardic Choices, or no, I believe it's the Bardic Voices trilogy, because there's also Bardic Choices. I know I shouldn't be looking through while I'm talking about this, but whatever. Yeah, so yeah, this is the main Bardic Voices trilogy. There's only 4 books in Bardic Voices, and then there's a second. You can tell it was meant to be more books. Like there's also Bardic Choices, which only has 1 book. But yeah, I originally had the first and third in this as separate books, and then I just bought this and didn't realize I already had 2 of the books. I'm like, okay, well, it gives me the missing book, and I'll sell off the other 2 books and just free up some shelf space. Although I kind of wish I still had the other ones, because like they had really, the third one especially had beautiful artwork. Although I do like the cover of this one better than the first book, even though it is the same storyline character. You can't really see too well, but it's a fiddler girl with a ghost. living over her, like a total Reaper looking thing. But yeah, it's pretty cool. So with the Bardic trilogy, the first one is the Lark and the Wren. The second one is the Robin and the Kestrel, and the third one is the Eagle and the Nightingale. And as you can see, they all obviously are bird themed, because in this world, bards are a very important thing, and the main characters are what are called free bards in a world where most people who are given legitimacy as being very talented musicians have to join guilds and become guild bards, but there's a lot of restrictions on them, and it's very much more manufactured and rigid and political, and it's very much tied into the church, which I think the whole church dynamic in these worlds is very interesting, because it's like, it definitely is mimicking the Christian and Catholic churches, even though I know Catholicism is a branch of Christianity, but some people just consider it separate. But like, it's definitely like that, but doesn't go enough into the actual what are the beliefs besides there being a sacrifice god to specify how it's different. But you don't really need to know. Like, there's churches are powerful forces in this world. They both on a local scale and on a grander political scale, and and they have to worry if you're an outsider being pursued by the church, like them deciding that, oh, you're not one of us, so we're going to use you as an enemy to unite my followers. So the first book has a young girl named Wren, who's a fiddler who is this terrible little tiny town with she's the bastard child of a woman who works in the local tavern, and Wren's one passion is playing music, but she just sees slowly her situation being, she's more and more trapped, more and more less options, and she's starting to get to she's getting older, and she's getting picked on by all the neighborhood kids who are basically given free reign to do that because she's the bastard child of the town. Everyone knows it, and no one's gonna give them a hard time. There's not gonna be any repercussions if they go after her. So one time she gets provoked one too many times, especially since she's getting older and her bullies are getting older, and now she has to worry about potential rape in addition to just being physically beat up or just verbally. So she decides out of her temper to be like, okay, well, you guys say I'm not that great of a musician. I'm going to go prove it to someone who would know, and I'm going to play for the ghost of Skull Hill, because there's this local ghost in this hill that cuts through this much more direct path back to the main road, but since there's the ghost there, it's become very unused. And he only attacks people at certain times, but he's been known to kill even priests and such if they're caught there at nighttime, so no one goes there. And she ends up playing for the ghost and basically impressing enough that she plays through all night, and he rewards her with a bunch of money, which she's able to then go and get further herself, because she wants to become a guild bard. That's her dream, to be able to professional music, but she wants to be comfortable with. She doesn't want to be a starving musician, worrying about her hands or instrument being damaged by the cold or starving. She wants to at least have some security, so that's why she wants to specifically be a guild bard. So she knows she has to do some things to do that first. Even though she's really good with her fiddle, she has to learn another instrument. She has to learn how to write music, and she has to perfect her skills better. So she's basically spent the year in a town perfecting those skills, and where she stays is actually pretty cool. It's a very much she will earn her living partially on the street during the daytime, and then nighttime she plays in a very high-end whorehouse where it's more so courtesans and escorts, rather than where it's it's very beautiful high-end ladies. It's not one where, and the people there, some people will just go to the place for the downstairs area just to relax, enjoy a good meal, just a good ambiance, and spend some time with some pretty ladies. But they do have the option to be able to go upstairs and for services, and it's very much an empowered women. They all are doing this profession because they choose to be, and they are not being forced into the situation, and they are very empowered women, which was pretty cool. As I read this the first time in middle school, like I had very sheltered upbringing with this type of stuff. Like I honestly, like a lot of my morality is from watching way too many sitcoms because my parents didn't really invest that much energy in like teaching me their own morals. So I just kind of was left to watching way too much TV to shape a lot of my viewpoints. So like I remember being very shocked and scandalized as like a 12-year-old being like, "What? It's a whorehouse? What? They're empowered and they're happy? Cool." Because I mean I know it's a very romanticized, like idealized one, but you know what? Some of those do exist where there is like a madam and that she has her like ladies that she looks out for, and it's not one where there's violence or anything. Like they have to pay briberies to the church and such. So like they're very pragmatic, but yeah, it's like it's the ideal ones where it's like, you know what, these are women who are taking control of their lives and using what they got to get by. But yeah, so she does that, and she, as I said, at night, during the day, she plays on the street for money, and then she takes lessons from this guy who is like a grandfather figure to her who leads to impact her. And eventually she does try out for the Bardic apprenticeships at the Kingsford Fair, and she had to dress up as a boy to do it because there have been no female bards. But she figured, okay, well, I'll pass all the tests, and like once they accept me, then I'll reveal I'm a girl. And she ends up being the first person, and like she was like second or third place in the first part of the competition, and second place in the second one, and she was like the first top person in the final day. And then she revealed like, oh yeah, I'm actually, instead of being the son of such and such, I'm actually the daughter of such and such. And they end up reacting negatively because they're super involved with the church, who's just misogynistic, and they've been saying how women are weak and inferior. So they basically like break her arms and her instruments. So yeah, way overkill. But she ends up being found by the free bards who save her and take her in, and they give her a bird name, which is what they do so that way it can't be tracked by like the church and the guilds too much. So she becomes Lark, Lady Lark, and she ends up becoming the apprentice to the leader of the Free Bards, who's a former guild bard who didn't like what was happening with the Bardic Guild, Master Wren. And then there's the rest of their story, and we also get introduced later on to the characters Robin and Johnny Breed, who later becomes Raven, or sorry, he's not Raven, becomes Kestrel. So yeah, that was the first book. Robin and Kestrel carry over as being important from the very end of the first book to being the main characters in the second book, and they deal with like some church, some like find out more about like what's going on with the skull of the ghost of Skull Hill, along with like some church shenanigans going on. They basically like, and I'm gonna give you the shorthand of this one because the first one like is very interesting, complex. This one's like also very interesting because like the characters like at that point they're a married couple. He has a stutter, so he's the one that has to usually stand back and like let her do the talking because he's very distinctive when he talks. Although he can play and sing beautifully, but it's just he had a very traumatic childhood, which if you read the first book you'll find out what it is. But anyways, she ends up, and she's a gypsy. Robin, and she's just. So she's used to like being like completely independent, not used to having to consult with someone and like basically be like, hey, I'm gonna go do this and be out all night, like having to like talk with someone about this and like someone being worried about her safety. So she's having to still get used, because they're newlyweds, she's still having to get used to this change and being a completely independent person to having to be in a partnership. And we also get introduced in this book to characters that are important to the third book, which is Nightingale and Tifur, who's a Hasper, which is a who's a bird person who looks like an eagle. And they're just like have like a little small role, although where like we see Nightingale and Tifur meet up and have this amazing performance moment together. Like Nightingale's also a gypsy, but she has magic. She has magic besides just bardic magic, which I haven't talked about yet, but I will in a second. But yeah, as I said, they carry on into the third book. So basically, the main thing is like them dealing with this fact that like this church is getting like way more powerful influence, and like a game like how this town's gone like church like crazy for religion and trying to figure out why, and it's because of this one particular father and how he's gaining more and more spectacle masses pretty much, but how he's also getting implementing all these church laws are making things much more restrictive. Like people are supposed to not. It's a town known for its jewelry and such, and like how people are like getting more and more conservatively dressed. How people are, how it's like basically if you're not following like becoming more religiously conservative, you are standing out and you're gaining unwanted attention. So it's basically pushing all the outsiders, and like they start talking against the non-humans, which there are in this world. Like as I mentioned, that there's a Hasper, like a bird person. There's elves. The ghost of Skull Hill, we find out was before he was killed was a non-human. There's Mintax, which are basically Minotaur people. There's Deli Ambrams, which are really cool. Like they're like these humanoid people who are described as being somewhat owl-like, but basically picture like an older-looking human person with like really pale hair that has like hair like sweeping on their cheekbones, like to go then blend in with their hair and like really thick eyebrows. And in this magical, like typical medieval magical world, they have like modern level of technology where it's like they have electricity and they can move cars, and like so they're super wealthy and powerful race of beings, but they don't have, since they're not human, they don't have like human level understanding of emotions and such. So it's a very, very cool world. I love this world. Like, and I like the fact that, like, we're seeing kind of like we're seeing the viewpoint of the outcast, because like it's very much like the church is in control. People who are part of these guilds, and like the main characters tend to be, I mean, they're all bards. That's a big thing of like all the ones in the main book, but also in the main 4 books. Actually, the 5th book, the main characters are not bards, but anyways, I'll go into that in a second. But also the fact that like there's gypsies, which is also cool, and that there's non-humans, and how it's like how these people are the outcasts, and how they, when there starts to be those negative trends where it's like people are trying to get power by uniting against the outsiders, like they're the ones that are impacted first, and they're the ones that have to be hyper vigilant about either fleeing or doing something about this. And how like even when it gets really bad, like it turns also to be against women, because as I said, the church is pretty misogynistic. So yeah, and also another cool thing is that there is bardic magic. So for most of the bards don't have magic, but all the main characters do. Like they have, it's that way through their music, they can sometimes tap into like the emotions of their audience and kind of like make them feel the music. So they can do, it's a very like subtle like emotion based manipulation, I would say. Although they do have power, they can also sometimes, the ones that are skilled in this can also kind of like hear a similar tune when they're playing music, and sometimes if they match that tune, especially if they do it 3 times, like they can work magic. And like there's times where the characters had to deal with elves, and it's like that's important, or where they've had to like be like, hey, don't look at me things, or hey, pay attention to this person. So like there's like, it's very subtle. It's not like all flash and boom type magic. So it's a very cool kind of thing. But like I said, it is kind of like altering people. It is manipulating people though. So for most of them, they just do it when they perform. But there are times where they do it for other things, where it's like, where there's like, they need someone to listen to them, or they need to protect themselves. So yeah. And then the 3rd book is Nightingale, like I said, the gypsy, who's another gypsy, but like I said, more, she has, in addition to bardic magic, like true magic and like empathy, and so she tends to very much avoid cities, but she's basically asked by 3 people to go and look into what's going on with the High King, because he's been ignoring his duties, and that's why there's been all these other problems arising. And like, since she's a gypsy, like something happening 3 times is they basically like considered like fate or destiny, so she's basically like kind of forced to do it against her preferences, because it's not against her will, but like it's basically she's doing it despite the fact that she really doesn't want to. But she knows that like other people have been agents and failed, so she basically does it without telling anyone she's actually going. And it's just really cool, like just the subtleties of her, like her gathering information, and the place where she ends up holding up is a really cool place. Like I wish there was a real freehold, because it sounds epic. And then Tefur is the eagle in that book, the eagle and the nightingale. And he ends up being appointed the personal minstrel of the High King, and he's doing his kind of as a repentance and also to help out the Deliambrum, the high-tech people, because like their non-humans been having troubles throughout the human kingdoms, and also because the Deliambrum have had this project in mind of mapping out the whole kingdom, and then selling those maps to people because the Deliambrum love gathering information. That's their thing. So yeah, that's like that's basically my recap of the series. I love it. It's hard for me to say which one's my favorite, although probably Eagle and the Nightingale. If I had to say just read one, that's my favorite. But honestly, any of them are good. It's good for people if you feel like an outsider, because it's like in the U.S. Christianity is the dominant religion. I grew up as in a very secular Jewish household, and like these days I identify as having Jewish heritage, agnostic belief system. So it's like I feel like an outsider when it comes to when people talk about religion, because as I said, in the U.S. Western culture, the assumption is if you're talking about religion, it's going to be Christianity oriented. So I definitely very much related to that. And as I said, Mercedes Lackey is one of my favorite authors. There's a fourth book that's not part of this trilogy. It's Cast of Corbies. It's called that because like one of the main characters is named Raven, and it's basically a bunch of people with like different like bird names like Crow and such, who are gypsies who are helping out this theater. And I know it takes place between the second and third book in the Free Bards, like the trilogy of 3 Bards, because they talk about this fire that happens at the end of the series. And then in the Bardic Choices, which as I said, I could tell this was going to be the one series she wanted to do more books of, but I know Mercedes Lackey is very pragmatic. Like if a series isn't selling, she stops working on it. That's probably why she doesn't. There's only been the 3 Diana Tregarde books, even though that's another one of my favorites. Like she has so many different great worlds, and even though I do like the Elemental Masters series and the 500 Kingdom series, like I do tend to like her older stuff a little bit better, just because I think some of her newer stuff tends to feel a little bit more formulaic. And rereading her books, I know that her endings aren't always, or sometimes a little weak, because sometimes they feel a little abrupt. But I feel like with her newer books, like they feel like there's not that power. To me, it kind of feels like it fizzles, right? It's like ending strong. For early books, I feel like the endings tended to be a little bit more solid. And I think it's just also her newer books, since I've read so many of her books, I feel like I see the reoccurring themes and character types a little bit too much, since she's so prolific, that it doesn't feel as fresh to me. Which is funny, considering how I say I reread books a lot. But yeah, as I was saying, the 5th book, there's the 5th book, where the characters are not bards at all, but instead it's an investigator working with a Justier mage, which is like basically a high-ranking church magician level, who has like really high, like has both magic and but also has political authority. And she's been the recurring character in several of the books, because this Justier mage is the cousin of Master Wren, the founder of the Free Bards. But they basically end up working together to find out, and working together about these murders that have been happening, and we find out that it relates back to the very first one of the books, the Lark and the Wren. So I do like how there is like the carryover between the books, but you don't have to read each book. Like if you just read one, you're fine, but like if you read all of them, there's more texture and like references that you get, that and recurring characters that you see. So yeah, I highly recommend it. This is so far my longest video. Sorry guys, but hey, I'm talking about a whole trilogy of books rather than just one. So yeah, I definitely recommend Mercedes Lackey in general. Start off with any, I mean, her Bardic books are great. She has so many different series, but as I said, my favorites, if you can just read any of them, the Bardic books are amazing. The Valdemar books are great, especially the earlier ones. I haven't been keeping up with her latest Collegium Chronicles just because I don't like the characters as much, and it's also I haven't been going to bookstores as much as I used to as a kid. The Elemental Masters is, any of those is great if you like fairy tales crossed with like elemental magic, set in I believe it's Edwardian England. Honestly, it's like when it's that kind of historical period, it's kind of hard for me to tell what's Edwardian versus Victorian, etc., because I'm not a history buff. The Diana Tregarde series is great. So yeah, so many great series by her. But yeah, I definitely highly recommend Mercedes Lackey in general. And I am going to wrap this up because, as I said, this is a way too long video. But yeah, hope you guys enjoy. Thanks for watching. Continue enjoying your own geeky vices. And until next time, see you later. Bye.